This video is sponsored by Paradox Interactive. Hey everybody, it's Party Elite, and I'm back today with some more Surviving Mars, a colony management game that released back in 2018, but has received quite a few updates over the years, from turning the red planet green, to exploiting the asteroids around it, and the caverns beneath its surface. Today we're taking a look at the Martian Express, a new DLC that introduces a new method of transportation for both your people and your goods. If you'd like to grab this DLC or learn more about it, don't hesitate to use the link in the description and pinned comment down below, but in this video, I'd like to go over some of the more pertinent changes coming with the Martian Express and how they might impact your future colonies. With no more time to waste, let's begin. Cheap early game movement. You might already be familiar with the shuttles in the base game, and you might use them quite a bit to help move stuff around, especially as a colony grows larger over time. These shuttles are typically only available after unlocking the appropriate technology though, unless you're playing as the rocket scientist commander profile who starts with it. This wait can mean having to restrain the expansion of your colony until you have said technology, and that can take quite a bit of time. Apart from that, shuttles require polymers and fuel, both processed resources that are harder to come by early on and have better uses elsewhere at times too. Introducing the Martian Express, a significantly cheaper and more readily available method of transportation for early game use. Right from the start of the game, regardless of your commander profile, you'll have access to building train stations and the tracks to connect them. The material cost to build the station is marginal, and the materials themselves are more easily acquired, relatively speaking, and tracks only require concrete to build, an extremely readily available resource. The power drain at train stations is minimal, and though maintenance requires machine parts, it isn't too long before you're able to produce them locally. Building the trains themselves requires slightly more advanced resources, but once a train is built, nothing short of a direct hit from a calamity takes it out of commission. These things are resilient. On which note, unlike shuttles that can't travel during sandstorms, trains have no such limitation. They start to move a little slower during cold waves, but they don't come to a complete stop, and they keep moving. With all these factors combined and their ability to transport people, solid, and fluid resources, trains open up a ton of options in the early game if you want to lay your colony out a little differently. You can now more viably establish a commute between pristine living quarters and the industrial areas, and you can take advantage of resources further away from your population centers without needing to spread your population out and force people to live in the middle of nowhere. Well, more in the middle of nowhere than literally being on a different planet. Naturally, there are some limitations, and we'll touch on them in a bit, but especially in the early game, the Martian Express can completely change how your colony develops and how you go about planning its overall layout and zoning. But trains and their stations don't sit stagnant as the rest of your colony goes on. The Martian Express has a slew of tech upgrades. Without belaboring the process or forcing you to spend days upon days researching train-related tech, the Martian Express allows you to upgrade your transit capabilities in a few ways. I would say only 2 of these are absolutely essential, and even then, it's all about your intended uses of the system. The ability to build trains underground is valuable, but only if you're interested in expanding below the surface. Taking advantage of green spaces is great, but it can wait until later when you've actually started terraforming the planet. Larger stations, meanwhile, may be of some value sooner rather than later. While the smaller station you start with only allows for 1 track and so can only go from one source to one destination and back and forth, the large station can have up to 4 tracks coming and going to 4 different stations. Keep in mind these larger stations still act as terminal stations and trains can't pass through them, but you can use them to daisy chain cargo. That means you can treat them as central hubs to store resources that'll be sent between 4 destinations and sources. And though you can't daisy chain passengers, they can still get on and off at the large station. They just won't get off one train and wait for another. This means it's still valuable at population centers from where you might want to send colonists to multiple different destinations though. Otherwise, making your tracks and trains safer and faster have obvious benefits, while making them more comfortable will make your colonists happier. These upgrades are all helpful in their own ways, all spread across multiple research paths, and they rarely get in the way of your other pursuits or draw your attention away. But they're still worth engaging with when the opportunity arises. It's the perfect way to add technology for a sort of secondary abilities and functionalities that you may or may not want to add to your colony, depending on the sort of space you're dealing with and what you want to prioritize. As you might imagine though, even with all the upgrades in place, there are a few major limitations. Something so cheaply and readily available is sure to have some shortcomings, and on that front, the train does not disappoint. Or, I guess it does. For one, you can only build tracks on flat terrain. You cannot go up or down ramps, and you can't even cross canyons even if either end is level. Even the slightest bump on the surface will prevent construction, meaning you'll have to terraform and flatten quite a bit of terrain at times, or build around it. You also need to have your start and end stations in place before you can start planning your tracks, and once you do build your tracks, if you want to demolish your stations to make adjustments, you have to completely destroy the tracks first. This is time-consuming and expensive, so you really have to plan ahead, especially with harder starts. If you want a track to be used for the transportation of passengers, you also need to make sure that your stations are appropriately placed. The source domes and destination domes need to fall within the radius around the station. If they don't, colonists won't be able to reach the station, or they won't know that they can use it to get to work. This means a single station can only support so many domes, as the space within the radius is quite limited. Beyond that, you need to keep an eye on the storage of the stations as well. While your trains are smart enough to move goods to where they're needed from where they're available, your stations have limited storage space, and if they've been stocked full with outgoing goods, they might not have any room to accept incoming goods. As you can imagine, if both ends of an end-to-end system are too full to accept a delivery, you're not going to see any of your goods actually get delivered, forever trapped on a train moving back and forth, and back and forth. Make sure to build storage depots around your stations within reach of drones so they can offload goods and make room for more coming in. This can take a bit of micromanagement, but if you don't stay on top of it, you might see your meticulously planned cargo network fall apart. And on the topic of falling apart, there's one final major shortcoming. While trains can work through disasters, as I mentioned earlier, a direct hit from something like a meteor can completely destroy the train itself, while a hit to the tracks will destroy the track section. When this happens, the train will get stuck in place until the broken section is repaired. This involves bringing both drones and construction material to that broken segment, and that can take quite a bit of time. Now, this isn't all that bad on its own, but if there are passengers on the train and you're too slow to repair the damaged section of track, your colonists inside will suffocate and die. There's no way to get these colonists out. They need to make it to their destination station, and it doesn't matter if the track is broken behind them or ahead of them. Wherever the break might be, it takes the entire line down. So, yeah, I would say the potential for loss of life goes up by a fair amount, and I'd say that's a hefty potential shortcoming, but you know what they say, right? No risk, no reward. The Martian Express is a very useful new addition to your colony. It opens up some options earlier than you'd otherwise have access to them, and these options can fundamentally change how you go about planning your colony, placing separate types of spaces, planning around elements like vistas and resources in a way that you might have had to wait for before. It has some limitations, of course, because otherwise it's just simply too powerful a solution, but by the time you're hitting those limitations, you'll be able to more comfortably transition into using shuttles or other techniques. Even then, it's not like the trains become useless in the late game. In fact, they've got terraforming-related benefits as mentioned previously, which only really starts to come up en masse around the mid to late game anyway, and the comfortable trains have value regardless of how far along your colony is. I hope this video has given you some insight into what you can expect with the Martian Express DLC for surviving Mars, and if you're interested in learning more or otherwise checking it out for yourself, don't hesitate to use the link in the description and pinned comment down below. For more strategy, sim, management, and city building coverage, don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel, and feel free to check out the video I've got on screen right now to see other games coming out this year that are worth being excited for. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.